The pristine white Porsche 911 Carrera floated like a metallic island in the crystal blue water, its leather interior already darkening as chlorinated water seeped through every seal. Karen Whitmore stood frozen at her kitchen window, champagne flute slipping from her manicured fingers to shatter on Italian marble, watching $60,000 of German engineering become the world's most expensive pool ornament. But this wasn't random vandalism, this was surgical revenge. Months in the making, delivered by the quiet neighbor she'd dismissed as harmless, as sirens wailed in the distance, and her husband's voice exploded through her phone about insurance, premiums, and social media disasters. Karen realized she'd finally pushed the wrong person too far. The war she'd started with arrogance and entitlement was about to cost her everything she'd built her identity around. And the woman responsible was just getting started. The sound of metal scraping against concrete jolted Sarah Chen from her morning coffee, sending scalding liquid across her kitchen table and onto the stack of medical bills she'd been staring at for the past hour. Through her modest ranch home's front window, she watched a gleaming white Porsche 911 Carrera reverse into her driveway, not beside it, not near it, but completely blocking the narrow entrance with surgical precision. The driver's door opened with the soft whisper that only comes with cars worth more than most people's annual salaries. Karen Whitmore emerged like she was stepping onto a red carpet, her platinum blonde hair catching the early September sunlight, designer heels clicking against the asphalt with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. In her 43 years of existence, Sarah's jaw tightened as she watched Karen adjust her Hermes bag and stride toward the mansion next door, the architectural monument to excess that had been the source of 18 months of construction noise, property line disputes, and increasingly hostile interactions. The woman didn't even glance toward Sarah's house, treating the blocked driveway like it was her personal parking space. Unbelievable, Sarah muttered, grabbing her keys and heading outside. The morning air carried the scent of Karen's expensive perfume and something else, the acrid smell of entitlement that seemed to follow her everywhere. "Excuse me," Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the meticulously landscaped gap between their properties. "You're blocking my driveway." Karen paused at her front steps, turning with the slow, deliberate movement of a predator sizing up potential prey. Her smile was all veneers and venom. "Oh, Sarah, good morning." She pronounced the name like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "I'm having some work done on my circular drive today. I'll move it later." Later. Sarah stepped closer, her worn sneakers a stark contrast to Karen's Italian leather "I have a job interview in 20 minutes. I need to leave now." Karen's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched with manufactured surprise. "Oh, that's right, you're still looking for work." The pause before looking for work carried enough condescension to fuel a small reactor. "Well, I'm sure they'll understand if you're a few minutes late. These things happen when you live in a neighborhood like this." The implication hung in the air like toxic smoke. Sarah's modest ranch house, inherited from her late grandmother, was the only non-mansion on Willowbrook Lane, a fact Karen never let her forget. "Karen, please. This interview is important. I've been out of work for 3 months, and Henny's fault is that." Karen's mask of politeness slipped for just a moment, revealing the cruelty underneath. "Maybe if you'd focused more on building a career, instead of playing house with that deadbeat husband of yours, you wouldn't be in this position." The reference to David, who'd lost his battle with cancer 8 months ago, leaving Sarah with crushing medical debt and a grief that still felt like drowning, hit like a physical blow. Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Move your car." Karen's smile widened, sensing blood in the water. "Or what? You'll call the police. I'm parked on a public street, technically, and even if I wasn't, do you really think they're going to side with?" She gestured vaguely at Sarah's appearance, the discount store clothes, the circles under her eyes, the desperation that clung to her like morning mist. Well, you know, Sarah knew. She'd learned over the past year and a half exactly how much weight Karen's name carried in their affluent suburb. The woman served on the hospital board, chaired 3 different charity committees, and her husband, Marcus, was a partner at the city's most prestigious law firm. When Karen spoke, people listened. When she complained, things got fixed. When she wanted something, she got it. "I'll be back by noon," Karen continued, already turning away. "Maybe 1 o'clock. Traffic. You know how it is." Sarah watched the woman disappear into her 7,000-square-foot monument to success, the front door closing with a sound like a judge's gavel. She stood there for a moment, surrounded by the oppressive quiet of a neighborhood where she'd never quite belonged, staring at the Porsche that represented everything she'd lost and everything she'd never had. Her phone buzzed. The interview reminder: Morrison and Associates, Senior Marketing Coordinator, potential salary enough to keep the house, and maybe start digging out from under the mountain of debt that threatened to bury her. Sarah walked around the Porsche, examining it with the calculating eye of someone who'd been pushed past their breaking point. The car was pristine, detailed to showroom perfection. Not a speck of dust on the white paint, not a fingerprint on the chrome. It was Karen's pride and joy, the physical manifestation of her superiority complex. She called the company, explained the situation as professionally as she could manage, and somehow convinced them to reschedule for that afternoon. But as she hung up, watching Karen's silhouette move past an upstairs window, something fundamental shifted inside her chest. The careful politeness, the desperate need to keep the peace, the fear of making waves, it all cracked like ice in spring. Sarah had spent her entire adult life being reasonable. She'd been reasonable when her mother died and left her with funeral expenses she couldn't afford. She'd been reasonable when David's insurance company found creative ways to deny claims. She'd been reasonable when Karen's construction crews started work at 7 a.m. every day for 6 months. When the woman's landscapers planted trees that blocked Sarah's garden from sunlight. When Karen had her property surveyed and tried to claim 3 feet of Sarah's backyard. She'd been reasonable right up until the moment Karen had looked at her like she was trash that needed to be swept away, blocking her driveway and her future with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences. The idea came to her slowly, like sunlight through morning clouds. At first, it seemed impossible, too dramatic, too risky, too much like something that happened in movies rather than real life. But as she stood there, watching Karen's shadow move through the mansion's windows, the plan crystallized with perfect, terrible clarity. Sarah walked back to her house, her steps steadier than they'd been in months. In her garage, covered by a tarp and surrounded by David's tools that she couldn't bear to sell, sat his pride and joy, a 1995 Ford F-150 with a rebuilt engine and a winch system he'd installed for their camping trips that would never happen again. She'd learned to drive it during his final months, when he was too weak to handle the truck himself but refused to sell it. Sometimes, he'd told her during one of their last conversations, the world pushes you around until you forget you can push back. Sarah pulled the tarp away and ran her hand along the truck's faded blue paint. The keys were still in the ignition, waiting. By 10 a.m., she'd made 3 phone calls. The first was to Miguel Rodriguez, who ran a small landscaping business and owed her a favor from when she'd done his company's marketing materials for free during her unemployment. The second was to Janet Morrison at the crane rental company where David used to work. They'd kept in touch, and Janet had always said to call if Sarah needed anything. The third was to Tommy Chen, her nephew, who worked construction and had access to equipment most people only saw in action movies. By 11 a.m., she had a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. By 11:30, she was committed to finding out which. Sarah showered and dressed carefully, choosing her best interview outfit, a navy blazer David had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, back when they still believed in futures and happy endings. She applied makeup with steady hands, covering the exhaustion and grief that had become her constant companions. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone she barely recognized, someone with purpose, with direction, with the kind of dangerous calm that comes right before a storm. The Morrison and Associates interview went better than she'd dared hope. They offered her the position on the spot, starting Monday. As she shook hands with her new boss, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope, real, tangible, hope for a future that didn't involve bankruptcy courts and foreclosure notices. She was walking back to her car when her phone rang. Sarah. Karen's voice carried an edge of annoyance. I need you to move your truck. I'm trying to get into my driveway, and you're blocking me. Sarah paused beside her Honda Civic, looking across the street at the scene she'd orchestrated. Her old Ford truck was parked exactly where Karen's Porsche. Sarah's alarm clock screamed at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before she'd set it to ring. She'd been awake for hours anyway, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of Karen's landscaping crew attempting to maneuver around the strategically placed Ford truck. The scraping of metal, the frustrated Spanish cursing, and the occasional blast of an air horn had provided a symphony of satisfaction throughout the night. She padded to her kitchen window and smiled at the chaos across the street. Karen's pristine circular driveway looked like a construction zone. Orange cones surrounded the truck. 3 different tow trucks had come and gone after discovering the vehicle was legally parked, and a growing crowd of confused landscapers stood around drinking coffee and checking their phones. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Remove your truck immediately or face legal consequences. Kay Whitmore. She deleted it without responding and made herself breakfast for the first time in months. Quail breakfast, with eggs and bacon and toast, not the usual cup of coffee and whatever was left in David's medicine cabinet of crackers. Today was her first day at Morrison and Associates, and she intended to celebrate every small victory. At exactly 7:30 a.m., as Sarah was backing out of her garage in the Honda, Karen's front door exploded open. The woman emerged like a hurricane in Chanel, her usually perfect hair showing signs of a sleepless night, her makeup applied with less than surgical precision. Sarah? Karen's voice carried across the street with the force of a bullhorn. We need to talk now. Sarah rolled down her window and smiled with the serene calm of someone who'd finally found their footing. Good morning, Karen. Lovely day, isn't it? Cut the act. Karen stalked across the street, her heels clicking like bullets on pavement. You think you're clever? This little stunt of yours? I'm not sure what you mean, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the same tone of innocent confusion Karen had perfected over the years. I'm just trying to live my life in this beautiful neighborhood. Karen's face flushed crimson. My landscapers can't work. My housekeeper can't get her car out. I have a charity luncheon at noon, and my car is trapped in the garage? That sounds frustrating, Sarah said, putting the Honda in reverse. Have you considered taking an Uber? I hear they're very reliable these days. This isn't over, Karen hissed, stepping back as Sarah began to move. You have no idea who you're messing with. Sarah paused, looking at Karen through the passenger window for a moment. Her mask of politeness dropped completely. Actually, I know exactly who I'm messing with. The question is, do you know who you've been messing with? She drove away, leaving Karen standing in the middle of the street like a general whose army had just retreated. The day at Morrison & Associates flew by in a blur of orientation meetings, system passwords, and the intoxicating feeling of being valued for her skills again. Sarah threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised her new colleagues. For 8 hours, she was Sarah Chen, the marketing professional, not Sarah Chen the widow, not Sarah Chen the victim. But even as she focused on campaign strategies and brand positioning, part of her mind was calculating the next move in her war with Karen. Because it was a war now, she'd seen it in the woman's eyes that morning, the shift from casual cruelty to genuine fury. Karen Whitmore was no longer dealing with a pushover neighbor, she was dealing with an opponent. Sarah's phone rang as she was packing up her desk at 5:30. Ms. Chen. The voice was crisp, professional, with the kind of authority that came from expensive legal training. This is Marcus Whitmore from Whitmore Patterson and Associates. I believe you know my wife. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. Mr. Whitmore, what can I do for you? I think you know why I'm calling. This situation with your vehicle has gone on long enough. My wife has been more than patient. Patient, Sarah laughed, a sound with sharp edges. Is that what we're calling it, Ms. Chen? I'm going to be very clear with you. If you don't remove your truck from its current location by tomorrow morning, we'll be forced to take legal action. Harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, interference with business operations. I can make your life very complicated. Sarah walked to her office window, looking out at the city skyline. David had once told her that the best defense against a bully was to show them you weren't afraid. Mr. Whitmore, I am parked legally on a public street. But since you mentioned legal action, I should probably mention that I've been documenting your wife's harassment of me for the past 18 months. The blocked driveway was just the latest incident. Silence on the other end of the line. I have photographs, recorded conversations, witness statements from my neighbors about the noise violations during your construction. Documentation of the property line disputes. Sarah's voice remained calm, professional. I'm sure your law firm would advise you that harassment cases can go both ways. You're making a mistake, Marcus said, his lawyer's composure finally cracking. My wife is well respected in this community. She serves on the hospital board, chairs multiple charitable organizations, and I'm sure that will be very impressive to a jury, Sarah interrupted, especially when they hear the recording of her mocking my dead husband. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She'd been bluffing about the recording. She'd never thought to record Karen's cruelties. Too stunned in the moment to think strategically, but the threat had landed exactly as intended. She drove home through rush hour traffic, her mind racing with possibilities. Karen would escalate now. She had to. People like her didn't retreat. When challenged, they doubled down. Sarah needed to be ready. At 7 p.m., she was in her garage with Tommy, Miguel, and 2 of Miguel's crew members, finalizing plans that would have seemed impossible just 48 hours earlier. The crane sat on the trailer behind the garage, its boom folded down like a sleeping metal dinosaur. You sure about this, Aunt Sarah? Tommy asked, studying the blueprints she'd sketched. I mean, it's brilliant, but ... But it's completely insane, Miguel finished, shaking his head. This Karen lady, she's really that bad. Sarah looked at the 2 young men who'd agreed to help her without question, thinking about all the ways she could explain 18 months of casual cruelty, of being treated like she didn't belong in her own neighborhood, of having her grief weaponized against her by someone who'd never suffered a real loss. She blocked my driveway this morning and told me it was my fault my husband died, Sarah said simply. Miguel's expression hardened. What do you need us to do? By 9 p.m. they had a plan that was either brilliant or the kind of thing that would get them all arrested. By 10 p.m. they had a backup plan and an escape route. By 11 p.m., Sarah was alone in her house, staring at David's photograph on the mantel and wondering if he would approve of what she was about to do. I'm not the same person you married, she whispered to the photograph. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I can't go back to being her. She's too tired, too beaten down. This version of me, ... She fights back. David's smile seemed to approve, but maybe that was just the wine talking. At 11:30 p.m., Sarah's doorbell rang. She wasn't surprised to find Karen on her front step, but she was surprised by the woman's appearance. Gone was the perfect hair and flawless makeup. Karen looked haggard, desperate, like someone who'd spent the day watching her carefully constructed world develop stress fractures. We need to talk, Karen said, pushing past Sarah into the house without invitation. Make yourself at home, Sarah said dryly, closing the door. Karen turned in the modest living room, her eyes taking in the second-hand furniture, the outdated decor, the stack of medical bills still scattered across the kitchen table. You can't win this. You know, she said, her voice carrying a strange mix of pleading and threat. I have resources you can't imagine. Connections, influence, money, Sarah finished. You have money, I get it. Then you understand why you should stop this foolishness before it goes any further. Sarah moved to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water she didn't want just to give her hands something to do. Do you know what my husband used to say? About people like you. Karen's jaw tightened. People like me? People who think money makes them untouchable. He used to say that everyone, no matter how rich or powerful, has the same weakness, which is. Sarah turned to face her uninvited guest. Seeing Karen clearly for perhaps the first time, not as an insurmountable force of nature, but as a woman whose entire identity was built on the shaky foundation of other people's fear and deference. They forget that other people are still people, not props in their personal drama. They get so used to everyone backing down that they never develop real courage. When someone finally says no, they don't know what to do. Karen's face cycled through emotions, confusion, rage, and something that might have been actual fear. I'm giving you one last chance to end this. Move your truck, apologize for this childish stunt, and we can pretend this never happened. Or what? Or I destroy you. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. I make some phone calls, and suddenly, your new job disappears. Your mortgage gets called in early, your car insurance gets canceled. You think I can't make those things happen? You think I won't? Sarah set down her water glass, her hand completely steady. Karen, you've spent so? At 9:15 a.m., Karen Whitmore sat in the Willowbrook Country Club's dining room, surrounded by the kind of women who measured their worth in charity committee positions and designer handbag collections. The victory over her troublesome neighbor had restored her sense of natural order, and she held court like a queen recounting a successful military campaign. You should have seen her face when the tow truck arrived, Karen said, cutting into her eggs Benedict with surgical precision. Some people need to learn their place the hard way. Margaret Ashford, the hospital board's vice chair, nodded approvingly. Poor people can be so vindictive when they're desperate. It's really quite sad. The whole situation was beneath me, really, Karen continued, warming to her audience. But sometimes you have to make examples, or they think they can walk all over you. 2 miles away, Sarah Chen was having a very different kind of morning meeting. She stood in Karen's backyard, watching Tommy position the crane while Miguel's crew made final adjustments to the pool area. The mansion's elaborate security system had been surprisingly easy to bypass. Money couldn't buy competence, apparently, and Karen's installers had prioritized aesthetics over actual protection. Pool's ready, called out Janet from the diving board, where she was securing the last of the underwater lighting cables they'd disconnected. Water levels perfect. Sarah nodded, checking her watch. Karen's charity luncheon would run until at least 11:30, then she'd spend another hour networking and preening. Plenty of time. Remember, Sarah called to the team, we're not vandals. We're performance artists making a statement about entitlement and consequences. Tommy laughed from the crane's cab. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Aunt Sarah, though. I gotta say, this is the coolest thing I've ever been part of. At 9:47 a.m., Karen's phone buzzed with a text from her housekeeper, Mrs. Whitmore. There are strange trucks in the backyard. Should I call police? Karen glanced at the message and typed back. Probably the pool maintenance crew. I forgot to mention them. Don't disturb them. She'd been having issues with the automated pool cleaning system for weeks. Another example of contractors who charged premium prices for substandard work. If they were finally fixing it, she didn't want Maria interfering. At 10:23 a.m., Sarah stood beside Karen's pristine white Porsche 911 Carrera, running her hand along the perfect paint job. The car sat in Karen's circular driveway like a monument to excess, every chrome detail gleaming in the morning sun. She thought about all the times she'd watched Karen emerge from this machine, treating it like a throne that elevated her above the common people. You sure about this? Miguel asked, positioning the crane's lifting straps with professional precision. Once we do this, there's no going back. Sarah looked at the mansion's windows, thinking about 18 months of humiliation, about David's memory being used as a weapon, about being treated like she was disposable. There was no going back the moment she blocked my driveway and told me it was my fault my husband died. The crane's engine rumbled to life. At 10:41 a.m., Karen was telling Margaret Ashford about her plans to renovate the guest house when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her home security company. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Central Monitoring. We're showing some unusual activity at your residence. Heavy machinery near your pool area, Karen frowned. I told you, it's maintenance. I authorized it. Ma'am, our records don't show any authorized maintenance for today, and the equipment signature suggests a crane, which seems unusual for pool work. A cold finger of unease traced down Karen's spine. A crane? Yes, ma'am, a large one. Should we dispatch security? Karen was already standing, grabbing her purse. With hands that had begun to shake, I'm on my way home. Don't do anything until I get there. At 10:44 a.m., the Porsche lifted slowly into the air, suspended by the crane like a mechanical angel ascending to heaven. Sarah watched from beside the pool, her phone ready to document every moment. The car hung there for a few seconds, perfectly framed against the blue sky, before Tommy began the careful process of maneuvering it over the water. "This is it," Sarah whispered, thinking of David. Thinking of every person who'd ever been made to feel small by someone with more money and less humanity. "This is what happens when you forget that other people matter." The Porsche touched the water with surprising gentleness, like a yacht being launched. For a moment, it floated, the aerodynamic design keeping it stable on the surface. Then physics took over, and $60,000 of German engineering began its journey to the bottom of Karen's infinity pool. Sarah filmed everything. At 10:52 a.m., Karen's own Porsche, her backup car, a Cayenne SUV, screamed into her driveway at a speed that would have horrified her neighbors if they'd been watching. She burst from the driver's seat like a woman possessed, running toward her backyard with the desperation of someone watching their world collapse in real time. She arrived just as the crane was lifting away, just as the last air bubbles were escaping from her beloved 911's interior. The car sat on the pool's bottom like a automotive reef, its white paint job already taking on the ethereal quality of something that belonged to another world. "What have you done?" Karen's scream carried across 3 properties, a sound of pure anguish that sent birds fleeing from nearby trees. Sarah stood calmly beside the pool, still filming, her face serene with the satisfaction of a job perfectly executed. "I gave your car a pool day," she said, her voice carrying the same casual cruelty Karen had perfected over the years. "I thought it might enjoy a swim." Karen stared at the submerged Porsche, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "You're insane. You're completely insane. This is ... This is poetic justice," Sarah suggested helpfully. "Karma, a learning experience. This is a felony." Karen's voice cracked like breaking glass. "Destruction of property. I'm calling the police right now." "Of course you are," Sarah replied, still filming. "Though you might want to consider how this is going to look." Karen Whitmore, pillar of the community, defeated by her widowed neighbor's pool maintenance crew. Karen's face cycled through shades of red that weren't found in nature. "You think this is over? You think you've won something? I will destroy you for this. I will take everything you have, everything you are." "With what?" Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying a dangerous calm. "Your car is underwater. Your perfect image is about to become a social media sensation." She held up her phone, showing the video she'd been streaming live to multiple platforms. "The whole internet is watching Karen Whitmore have a meltdown because someone finally stood up to her." Karen grabbed for the phone, but Sarah stepped back smoothly. "And there's more coming. This is just the beginning." "More?" Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "What do you mean, more?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time in their relationship, Karen Whitmore saw something in her neighbor's eyes that made her take an involuntary step backward. It wasn't anger or grief or desperation. It was the calm satisfaction of someone who'd been planning this moment for a very long time. "I mean, I've been documenting everything, Karen. 18 months of harassment, property line disputes, noise violations, intimidation tactics. I have recordings, photographs, witness statements. Your lawyer husband threatened me yesterday. Remember, I recorded that too." Karen's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Sarah pulled out a small digital recorder, pressing play. "Marcus," Whitmore's voice filled the air, "I can make your life very complicated. Harassment? Intentional infliction of emotional distress? That's illegal," Karen shrieked. "You can't record someone without their consent." "Actually, I can. Single-party consent state." Sarah tucked the recorder away. "Your husband should have known that, being a lawyer and all. Though I suppose he was too busy threatening a widow to think clearly." The sound of sirens began to build in the distance, growing closer with each second. Karen looked toward the front of the house, then back at her submerged car, then at Sarah's calm face. "They're going to arrest you," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You destroyed my property." "That's a crime." "Maybe," Sarah acknowledged. "But here's the thing about crimes, Karen. Intent matters. Motive matters. And when the police hear about 18 months of harassment, when they see the video of you blocking my driveway and mocking my dead husband, when they learn about your husband's threats, well, I think they're going to be very interested in the whole story." The sirens were close now, maybe 2 blocks away. Karen looked around frantically, as if searching for an escape route from a nightmare that kept getting worse. "You can't prove any of that," she said, but her voice was shaking. "It's your word against mine." Sarah pulled out her phone again, scrolling through files with practiced ease. "Video of you blocking my driveway. Audio of you telling me it was my fault, David died. Photos of your construction crews violating noise ordinances. Witness statements from 3 neighbors who saw you harassing me. Medical records showing David's cause of death, proving you lied about him being a deadbeat." She looked up at Karen's increasingly pale face. "Should I continue?" The police cars rounded the corner, their red and blue lights splashing across the mansion's perfect facade like a disco ball in hell. Karen watched them approach with the expression of someone who'd just realized they'd bruised. 3 months later, Sarah Chen stood in the conference room of Morrison & Associates, presenting a campaign strategy to their biggest client, a presentation that would have been impossible in her previous life. When grief and fear had made her invisible even to herself, The campaign's theme was resurrection, how brands could rebuild after crisis, how companies could emerge stronger from their lowest moments. The key, Sarah explained to the room full of executives, is understanding that people connect with authenticity. They want to see that you've learned from adversity, that you've grown rather than just survived. Through the glass wall, she could see her assistant holding up her phone with an urgent expression. Sarah wrapped up the presentation with practiced confidence and stepped outside to take the call. Mrs. Chen, this is Detective Martinez. We need you to come down to the station. There's been a development in the Whitmore case. Sarah's stomach tightened. The criminal charges against Karen had been dropped 6 weeks ago, the district attorney deciding that 18 months of documented harassment constituted sufficient provocation for the property destruction. Karen had been ordered to pay restitution for Sarah's legal fees and undergo court-mandated anger management. The civil lawsuit was still pending, but Sarah's lawyer assured her it was just a matter of time and settlement amounts. What kind of development? Mrs. Whitmore was found this morning in her car in the parking lot of the Riverside Mall. Apparent overdose. She's alive. But ... double quotes. Detective Martinez paused. She left some things for you. Letters, packages, said she'd been trying to work up the courage to deliver them for weeks. Sarah sat down hard in her office chair, staring out at the city skyline that had become her symbol of moving forward. Is she going to be okay? Physically? Yes. Mentally? ... That's harder to say, Mrs. Chen. I need to ask when's the last time you had contact with her. Not since the court hearing 2 months ago. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Detective? What was in the letters? An hour later, Sarah sat in the police station's victim services room, staring at 3 manila envelopes with her name written in Karen's distinctive handwriting. Detective Martinez sat across from her, his expression carefully neutral. We had to read them as part of the investigation, he explained. They're not threatening or dangerous. But they single quotes intense. Are you sure you want to do this now? Sarah picked up the first envelope. I need to know. The first letter was dated 2 weeks after the pool incident. Sarah, I know you probably never want to hear from me again, and I don't blame you. I've been sitting in this empty house for days, trying to understand how everything went so wrong. The insurance company won't cover the car because they're calling it an act of war between neighbors. Marcus filed for separation last week. The hospital board asked for my resignation. The charity committees? Well, you've probably seen the news. I keep watching that video of me screaming at you by the pool, watching myself become exactly the kind of person I used to think I was better than. Watching you stand there so calm, so prepared, so completely in control while I fell apart. And I realized something that's been keeping me awake for weeks. You were right about everything. I don't know when I became the kind of person who would mock a widow about her dead husband. I don't know when I started thinking that having money meant I could treat people like they were disposable. I don't even know when I became so afraid of not being perfect that I had to make everyone else feel imperfect. But I know when it started to change. It was when you looked at me that last morning and said I was all bark and no bite. You saw through everything I'd built around myself and recognized what I'd forgotten, that underneath all the money and status and pretense, I was just another scared person trying to feel important. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing because you did something for me that no one else in my life has ever done. You held up a mirror and forced me to see who I'd become. And as much as I hate what I saw, I needed to see it. The person who tormented you for 18 months is gone. I drowned her in that pool right along with the car. Now I have to figure out who I am without her. Thank you for showing me that consequences are real, even for people like me, especially for people like me. Sarah set the letter down, her emotions a tangled mess of satisfaction, confusion, and something that might have been pity. She opened the second envelope, dated a month later. Sarah, I've been going to therapy 3 times a week. Dr. Richardson says I have what she calls entitlement trauma, that I was so afraid of being ordinary that I became extraordinary in all the wrong ways. She says, the way I treated you was really about my own fear of becoming irrelevant. I found out some things about you that I never bothered to learn when we were neighbors. You graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern. You ran a successful marketing consultancy before David got sick. You won 3 regional awards for nonprofit campaigns. You were never the poor neighbor I told myself you were. You were a successful professional who gave up her career to care for someone she loved. I also found out what kind of cancer David had. My father died of the same thing when I was 12. I know what those last months are like. I know what it costs financially and emotionally. I know how it feels to watch someone you love disappear, piece by piece, while you pretend to be strong enough to handle it, but you actually were strong enough. You sacrificed everything for him, and then rebuilt your life from nothing. You turned grief into purpose, defeat into strategy. You became the kind of person who could plan something as audacious as that pool stunt, and execute it flawlessly. I became the kind of person who would mock you for it. The difference between us isn't money or education or social status. The difference is that when life tested you, you became more human. When it tested me, I became less. I'm trying to learn how to be human again. It's harder than I thought it would be. Sarah's hands were trembling as she opened the third envelope. Dated just 1 week ago. Sarah, I've been driving past your house every day for 2 weeks, trying to work up the courage to knock on your door. I wanted to apologize in person, but every time I see you in your garden, or getting your mail, I remember the look on your face when I told you David's death was your fault, and I know I don't have the right to ask for your time, so I'm writing instead, probably for the last time. I'm leaving Will. Marcus is keeping the house as part of the divorce settlement, but I can't live there anymore. Every time I look at that pool, I see my whole life floating at the bottom of it. The person I was, the things I valued, the way I treated people, all of it underwater and ruined. But here's the strange thing. I'm grateful. Not for losing everything, but for learning what everything actually was. I thought my life was full because it was expensive. I thought I was important because other people were afraid of me. I thought I was happy because I never had to face consequences. You taught me that real power isn't the ability to hurt people without consequences. It's the ability to face consequences and grow from them. You showed me that dignity isn't something you can buy, it's something you earn by how you treat others. When you have nothing left to lose. I'm moving to Portland to work with a nonprofit that helps people facing medical bankruptcy. I don't know if I'll be any good at helping people instead of hurting them, but I want to try. I want to become someone who makes the world a little better instead of a little worse. I know you'll probably throw this letter away, and I don't blame you, but I needed you to know that what you did to me destroying my car? Yes, but more than that, destroying my delusions about who I was, saved my life. The person I was before was slowly killing herself with toxic perfection. At least now I have a chance to become someone worth being. Thank you for being stronger than me. Thank you for fighting back. Thank you for teaching me that everyone matters, even widows with secondhand furniture and medical debt, especially them. I hope your new life is everything. Mine never was real, meaningful, and built on treating others the way you want to be treated. With genuine respect and gratitude, Karen. P.S. There's a check in the third envelope. It's not charity or guilt money. It's payment for 18 months of education about what it means to be human. Use it however you want, or throw it away. If it makes you feel better, either way, you've earned it. Sarah stared at the check. $50,000. More money than she'd seen in one place since David's life insurance payout. Her first instinct was to tear it up, but something stopped her. This wasn't Karen Whitmore trying to buy her way out of consequences. This was someone trying to make amends, the only way she knew how. Detective Martinez leaned forward. How do you feel about all this? Sarah folded the letters carefully, thinking about the woman who'd screamed at her beside the pool, comparing her to the person who'd written these words. I feel like I accidentally created a human being. Is that good or bad? Sarah thought about David, about what he would have said about mercy and second chances, and the possibility of redemption. I think it's complicated. That evening, Sarah sat in her garden, the same garden that Karen's construction had blocked from sunlight for 6 months. The trees had been removed as part of the restitution agreement, and her tomatoes were thriving.